What I will say is there needs to be a greater focus from West Coast on skill level.
These days you'd get life, Diggers. He was out of breath.
He deregistered.
He was limp. We almost lost the great man.
The spotlight is now being directed at Andrew McQualter. I'm not saying he's a coach killer. Mark, I am telling you Brennan Cox is a lock. It's as simple as that. I know I've called you Mark rather than Steve-O. Brennan Cox is in their best 18.
Well, g'day, my name's Mark Stevens. I'm at Zero Hanger HQ for another episode of The Outer Wing, brought to you by TABtouch. Real punters play here. As usual, a great man, Digby Beacham, the best journo west of here, is waiting. Let's get on with it. Well, Diggers, how are you travelling this week? We're getting closer. The Purple Army, you're up and about.
That they are, Steve-O. Great to have a chat. I hope you're nice and refreshed after your week off. Certainly there's a lot of excitement here in WA, and you can understand why, because Fremantle are minor premiers and they get a wonderful dress rehearsal this weekend against Melbourne. We'll touch on that in a second. And a lot of eyeballs are going to be on West Coast, in particular Jake Waterman and Andrew McQualter, as they look to rebound from that disaster at the MCG against Richmond last weekend.
Yeah, Dockers versus Melbourne's a beauty this week, isn't it? So part of me's thinking the Dockers are gettable. I think Melbourne are a big chance at the G, but also, as you said, knowing the cockroach, the coach there, he's going to have them fired up. They'll want to get a win under their belt, a full dress rehearsal.
I would have thought so, Steve, and this represents a wonderful opportunity for Justin and the football department, and of that, obviously, is the team, to use this as a perfect dress rehearsal for what could likely, what they want, what they expect, what the football industry expects will take place in late September. So it's a Saturday afternoon game at the MCG against a formidable opponent, one that really relishes playing at the home of football. They've been terrific under Stephen King. There's no getting away from that. But for Fremantle, surely you implore the players and everyone involved with the football club to treat this as if this is a grand final. I know the two WA clubs bemoan their lack of opportunities at the home of football. We saw what West Coast did with their opportunity last week. This is a great chance for Fremantle to go over there, get it done, replicate what they want to do later in the year, and then come back hopefully with 4 points, knowing full well that they can tick that MCG box against a quality opponent.
Well, it'd give them confidence, wouldn't it, if they get back here when it really counts, just to have that box ticked off.
Absolutely. And in Melbourne, they're going to come up against a side which is, very much in the top 4 conversation. Are they going to be in that wild card spot? What do they want to do? Where do they want to get to? If they take down Fremantle, we know what Fremantle did to them earlier in the year over here. They're a completely different beast, aren't they, Melbourne, at the MCG? But this is also a wonderful chance for Stephen King and his players to measure themselves against the side which is going to play 2 home finals at Optus Stadium in September.
And you talk about dress rehearsals. I mean, there's talk and reports here, Diggers, I'm sure you've heard this, that they're thinking of pushing for Wharfie time on grand final day already. There's Simon Garlick, my old mate from the Bulldogs, getting ahead of himself as CEO there. Surely you just let it, you'd make it
Nothing like
first.
a bit of Wharfie time.
Well,
you love it, Steve-O.
Do we need to be talking about grand final day, though? And I'm a believer that grand final's a generic game. No silly songs, no country road, pure football.
No. Yeah, I'm a little bit with you on that front. I think that the AFL grand final, it's a neutral game, and that's why the prelims are wonderful games. And not saying the grand finals aren't, but I love the prelims and that tribal nature of them, particularly when you have to go interstate. But for mine, it's a perfect opportunity, grand final day. Just let the two sides go about it. But Simon Garlick, Wharfie time, it's something which has taken hold over here. The Fremantle fans love it. It's part of their identity, their DNA. We know that, with Fremantle being a port town. But, I'd just like to see them worry about things on field at the moment and worry about that a little bit later. Yeah,
1 week at a time. What do they need to improve on? They're getting it done, but not quite 100%, even though I thought the Dogs were pretty plucky, if not for a bad turnover from Rory Lobb in that third quarter. Could have been a far more interesting game, and my producer Jeremy's even nodding in the background. He's still flat about that Lobb kick. So little things just went wrong at the wrong time, but the Dockers got it done. What do they need to improve on?
I think they just need to tidy up their kicking for goal for mine, Steve-O, and we'll talk about West Coast in a second, but that there is still a little bit of an area of concern for mine. Their finishing hasn't been as efficient as what we were seeing earlier in the year? Are they winning enough football at the source? I think they're always going to be okay in that area because they've got Luke Jackson and they've got high-end talent running through that midfield. But if you're to just strip it all back, we need to see Fremantle, we being the football community, if you're a Fremantle person, you want to see Fremantle play 120 minutes of really solid, complete football. It's not something that they've been able to churn out in the last 6 to 8 weeks. They've been a bit hit and miss. We know when they go at a rate which no other side can match, clearly. And that was the case again there on the weekend. It was an arm wrestle. And then when Fremantle have their 10 to 15 minutes of dominance, they put a significant gap between themselves and their opponent. They've done it time and time and time again. But what you would like to see, and I'm sure that Justin Longmuir wants to see this weekend against Melbourne, is a Fremantle side that comes to the game tuned up, ready to go, invested emotionally and physically, lead at quarter time, lead at half time, lead at three-quarter time, and leave the MCG ground as victors.
And Oscar McDonald, 20 plus. I mean, there's a squeeze for spots on. Talk about rejuvenated careers, and there's some magic happening over there when a guy like that can just get all-round BOGs.
Yeah, he was really good. He was super. Now, was he going to be in a position on the ground which worked in his favour the way the game was played? Probably. Look, what you do know is that he is a very able replacement and he's ready to rock and roll when needed. And he's been needed over the last 2 weeks with Brennan Cox being managed. And there's been a bit of chatter over this side of the Nullarbor, Steve-O, about, is Brennan Cox going to get back in? Is Oscar McDonald going to hold his spot? If Brennan Cox is fit and available, Brennan Cox comes in, Oscar McDonald makes way. It's as simple as that. Justin Longmuir and the match committee are massive fans of Brennan Cox. So once he's up and going, Brennan Cox plays ahead of Oscar McDonald.
That's a big call. I mean, he was BOG, or all the Boffins here gave him BOG in our MVP. You can't drop him now, Diggers. Cox would need to prove himself, I think, because I've seen Cox get exposed a bit too in games this year, particularly the night that Jack Gunston got loose, and he seems a bit slow at times. So you think that Cox is just a lock?
Mark, I am telling you, Brennan Cox is a lock. It's as simple as that. I know I've called you Mark rather than Steve-O. Brennan Cox is in their best 18, and he will be in that side ahead of Oscar McDonald.
I'll pen that in ink, Diggers. So, obviously it's going to be a lot more intense, though, this week, isn't it? So you think the Dockers will get it done?
I hope so, and I think so, yeah. I think the weather over there is going to be fine, which will suit Fremantle. I think there's going to be a bit of up and back about this game. We saw that, was it 2 games ago over there at the MCG when Melbourne got Fremantle? I think it was early last year, and Cozzy Pickett got off the chain. So they'll need to be cognizant of that, Fremantle, but it feels to me that Fremantle are building. Hayden Young returned last week. Hopefully they do get Brennan Cox back this week. They're fit, they're well, they're healthy. That forward line's going to get sufficient supply. So I'll lean towards Fremantle, but I think Melbourne will most definitely make it close.
I love it. So that's the Freo Dockers, and they're flying. Now let's take a look at West Coast. The news is not so good there. I mean, McQualter now 0-4 against his former mob Richmond. I watched this game closely. I just thought, Diggers, that eventually, for all the bad kicking, that West Coast would find a way to get this done against a very, very young Richmond team. But that was an extremely disappointing performance.
Yeah, it was. There's no disputing that, and you can't argue that. And I think Andrew McQualter used the word deflating post-match, and that's a fair enough assumption because when you're not impacting the scoreboard in the manner that you're expected to, you're just opening the door for the opposition to go about their business. And to be fair, Richmond took their chances. West Coast absolutely butchered theirs. And they're not the first side, and they won't be the last, Steve-O. You've seen enough football to know that if you're not taking your chances in front of goal, you leave yourself open. That's what West Coast did. I'm still haunted by the 1998 grand final, that first half, North Melbourne against Adelaide, Steve-O. North Melbourne had Adelaide on the ropes. They couldn't deliver the knockout blow. What happened in the final 60 minutes is part of football history. The Crows went back to back. So it happens on the big stage. It happens in, late July, early August between two average sides. That was the case last weekend.
Yeah, it normally has a way of balancing itself out. If you kick poorly, the footy gods sort of help you out in the end and you get over the line if you have all the territory. Didn't matter for the Kangas that year, Diggers. But, yeah, in this game, it just didn't happen because in the end, And despite all the bad kicking, Richmond dominated the last quarter, all the inside 50s, as I said, the territory. And if Tom Lynch had kicked straight in the last term, it would have been a lot more.
Yeah, that's spot on. And like at one stage, I think West Coast were 3 goals 18. Correct me if I'm wrong, Steve.
316.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, I was at the Rising Sun in Richmond. I couldn't believe it. I was over a pint there. It was crazy. People were up in arms.
Yeah, and if you were looking at that, if that was a game at the old Western Oval or at, Vic Park, you'd think, oh, well, there's wind, it's cold, it's wet, Moorabbin, Windy Hill. You're not taking your chances because you're not all that familiar with the surrounds as an interstate side. But it was sun-drenched. It was a beautiful afternoon in Melbourne, and West Coast just couldn't get it done. And Jake Waterman was to blame. Harley Reid was a bit wayward. Young Job Shanahan, we've got a lot of time for. He missed a couple of shots as well. It just became infectious, as it so often does.
And Waterman, of course, 2 goals 6. And we've spoken about it before. It's just he's a classy footballer, isn't he? So it's a really weird one to work out. Maybe has a haircut or something, Diggers, that may change things. He needs a circuit breaker. Perhaps the mullet goes.
Yeah, it's a hard one, Steve, isn't it? I've been thinking about this since Sunday, and there's 3 parts of the game, isn't there? There's defence, midfield, and forward line. Like, as a defender, your first job is to defend. That's your sole objective, your first objective, to stop your opposition player getting the ball and kicking goals. Then once you win the football, use it well, because you're coming out of the back half where if you turn it over, it can be very, very costly. Midfielders, arguably the most gifted players in the team in a really integral part of the ground. So you can find the football, you've got a wonderful tank, and normally you're highly skilled because you're supplying the forwards. Forwards, their job is to draw the football, and once you have that football, is to kick accurately, impact the scoreboard in a positive manner. Now, Jake Waterman is a high-end talent, an All-Australian player, and he's had a very solid season. But he has cost West Coast games. That game on the weekend, had he taken his chances, West Coast win. He missed that shot on goal against North Melbourne late, kicks that, they win that game of football. He was wayward against Richmond here at Optus Stadium early in the year. He had opportunities to put Port to the sword here, didn't do it. He is proving really problematic, and because of his inefficiencies in front of goal, Steve-O, the spotlight is now being directed at Andrew McQualter. I'm not saying he's a coach killer, but what's happening now is Andrew McQualter is fair and square in the crosshairs of those saying, should he be reappointed? He's got 1 more year to go. Is the West Coast game plan working? They've lost, I think, 8 in a row now, West Coast. It shouldn't be that record because Jake Waterman's not doing his job.
No, it hurts, doesn't it? It was enough to drive Dersma to tears. I mean, what was going on there?
Yeah.
It was an emotional day. Perhaps was it to do with having all his family there on the home of footy at the MCG? I mean, he probably should have been given more game time in the middle, to be honest. The tears were unusual.
He had a couple of shaky moments too, didn't he, Willem? So, look, it was a big day for him. We saw what Jagger Smith was able to do 24 hours earlier against, a really good opponent in Brisbane. He's in that conversation for the Rising Star. I think Jagger Smith or young Harry Dean's probably now ahead of Willem, but it shows he cares, which is a great thing. I don't mind it. He's a young man who's had a wonderful season at West Coast. And he's hurting, like a lot of West Coast supporters. I can tell you over here, Steve-O, the fallout and the mood of the West Coast supporter base, it's quite dire. They're really, really disappointed in how their football side performed on the weekend, and you can certainly get where they're coming from.
Yeah, now, for all this negativity, the stuff-ups, the bad kicking, the 8 losses in a row, I think they're a chance this week. It's a danger game for Collingwood with so many players out. When you travel over there, they become reliant on Dacos, very much the Pies and a couple of others, that if they click, they could actually win this one.
They're not hopeless. Now, it's hard to declare that West Coast can win. What did they kick? 9-19 last week. They're playing a side who, before last weekend, stumbled. We were talking about them as maybe being an outside premiership threat. They've got some injuries, haven't they? Howe, Lipinski, DeGoey, is he going to get up?
Maynard.
Perryman's injured. So, look, and West Coast, to be fair, asked a few questions of Collingwood, didn't they, in that Scott Pendlebury milestone game. There will be a response from West Coast, but the class and experience and the coaching, I think McRae's coaching the socks off them. He is doing a really good job with Collingwood. Are they at tipping point? Perhaps. But I think overall their class and experience will carry them through.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this game. So that's the Eagles heading into another big one against the Magpies.
Could a mullet with tightly tapered sides reduce wind resistance, allowing for faster acceleration off the mark? Now that's something to think about.
What are you really gambling with?
Now, news-wise, Diggers, you touched on this. Andrew McQualter a couple of weeks ago, I thought, well, I've been on and off McQualter saying, let's wait. Then you could see things happening after I watched them closely against the Bulldogs. I thought you could see what they were trying to do. Now I'm sort of in the camp where, there's no rush. Nobody's going to be knocking on his door to poach him. So perhaps wait till the middle of next year.
Well, it's hard, but I've been in the corner of extend him, and it's hard to stick fat to that in the wake of what we've witnessed a couple of times since their mid-season bye. And I've wrestled with this also, Steve-O. Is the bad kicking in front of goal, is that his fault or not? And ultimately, you're driving the bus, aren't you, as the coach of the football club? What I will say is there needs to be a greater focus from West Coast on skill level. It's all well and good to play a bit of a chaotic brand and take the game on and the rest of it. But you look at the sides at the top of the ladder and sides that are winning flags of late are sides that are really, really skilled. They're complete in a lot of areas, but they use the ball well. West Coast, and it's not just Jake Waterman in front of goal. They've got some butchers of the footy. I've been hot on Liam Duggan for a long time, but it just seems to be tolerated. He can make bad decisions and he can turn the football over, and there's no pressure to be brought on his position and the way that he uses the football. And at the other end of the ground now, we've got Jake Waterman. So, look, Andrew is contracted for 2027. I spoke to someone who I've got a lot of time for at the football club last week, and this was pre-Sunday, obviously. They were comfortable with how he was progressing without being overly enamoured. And the message to me was, no, he'll be there next year. There's no blue about that. But at this stage, it's likely he is going to be entering 2027 without an extension.
Yeah, he and Clarko, it looks like, will go in riding, shotgun without that extra year. So now time for Diggers' list. So I've thought about Waterman's goal kicking and thinking of WA players or West Coast players. You can do either here, Diggers, that could help him out. In the history over there, players who are just dead-eyed dicks in front of goal that perhaps they could get in to help out Waterman. Give us your best goal kickers.
Oh, well, look, I struggled with 5, Steve. You could make a case for, I think, like a Brett Heady, who was a very, very good finisher in front of goal back in those premiership days, 1992-94 of West Coast, and also maybe Quinton Lynch, who I know he could be a bit scattery, but he was a 2-time leading goal kicker for West Coast, had a very good 2006 when they won that flag, beating Sydney. So I thought those two you could probably put together alongside each other in 5.
Chris Lewis.
Yeah, it was a
Good
beautiful
finisher.
kick of the football. Chris, that 1990 final series was as good as you'll see. So Louis could be another one. You could lean on a Phil Matera as well. It was a very efficient shot on goal. Jamie Cripps recently out of the game, retired because of that knee injury. He was a good finisher as well. So they've got some options there. I'll throw one at you here, Steve-O. Number 4, Brad Smith, mature age recruit out of Subiaco by West Coast at the end of 04. He kicked 109 goals in the Waffle season. He was a prolific goal kick. He was that stay-at-home full forward. He blew his knee out in an internal trial game down in Bustleton in, I think, February of 05, and then he blew it out again 12 months later, another knee, ACL tears. So he missed 05 and 06, and then he was delisted, and he found his way back at Subiaco where he kicked another 100 goals. He ended up with over 500 goals from 130 or 140 games. He was a dead-eye dick and a prolific goal kicker, and West Coast recruited him for that reason, and we never got to see him at AFL level, sadly, but he was a beautiful kick on goal, Brad Smith. I'll go number 3, Mark McCrae. We saw what he did to Essendon at Marvel Stadium and the Docklands back in the day. He was a beautiful kick of the foot. He had great mechanics. It was a lovely, fluent action that Mark possessed, so I would put him in at 3. Coleman medalist back in 1999. Scott Cummings kicked 95 goals that year, Steve-O. He was a very, very efficient kick on goal when he was fit. Battled injuries, didn't he, the big fella? Finished, at Collingwood prematurely, I think before his 30th birthday, Scotty. But again, he was a really good kick on goal. And there's one who I think just stands out above all others, and his action could be a little bit jittery, but he was an 8-time leading goal kicker at West Coast, Josh Kennedy. He had to battle through some of his own yips with that stuttery approach to delivery, but he was a very, very good player, Josh Kennedy, and I would have thought he's one that would resonate particularly with Jake. Now, whether he's had conversations with Jake, I do not know, but I would have thought that you could pick up the phone to Josh Kennedy and he'd be only too willing to help. Yeah,
I love it. What about Big Summer, the fruit and veggie king? He had an interesting sort of swinging left boot. You couldn't quite trust it, could you? He could, from a certain pocket, where it suited him, he was magnificent.
Well, you remember that year, Steve-O, and you and I were talking about this on the message yesterday. I don't know the exact return. It was 91 when West Coast marched to that grand final out at Waverley against Hawthorn. I think Summer had in excess of 200 shots on goal. Now, that was the era when they were kicking big numbers and there were a lot of goal kickers registering triple figures. He kicked 111.89 or 111.91 plus a heap out on the full. It was an extraordinary season. In 92, obviously played in that flag, and he did so in 94, and then the career started to taper. But old Sum, he wasn't all that accurate, but boy, oh boy, he could find the footy.
Oh, he's a ripper in 94, of course. Remember Danny Southern putting him in that sleeper hole. Wow.
You love that, don't you? He nearly murdered him.
Oh, well, Stevie Wallace obviously cleaned up Heady with a shoulder to the head now that would be 6 to 8. Probably, and then the sleeper hold, Southern was fine for. These days, you'd get life, Diggers. He was out of breath. He was limp. We almost lost the great man. So can laugh now, but it was serious times, Diggers. Now let's move on. Best bets for this weekend for TABtouch. Real punters play here. What do you like?
Well, I'm liking Andrew Brayshaw and Tommy Sparrow to get 25 plus, and Josh Tracy, our man, to kick 2+ goals in that blockbuster at the G on Saturday afternoon. That's paying $3.45 with TABtouch. So Sparrow, Brayshaw, 25 plus disposals. Josh Tracy for 2+ goals, $3.45 with TABtouch. And we'll go to the game here. Collingwood 1-39. I'm thinking it's in that region, and also under 170.5. There's a bit of weather around here later in the week, Steve-O, including the weekend. And for that to occur, that same game multi, $3.80 with TABtouch.
I like it, Diggers. I like the Eagles at the line in this game, if not to cause an upset. I think that'll be an interesting game, even though we've been bagging West Coast most weeks. I think they're a chance, Diggers. And you've been great again. Thanks for bringing up all those North Melbourne supporters, and it was a pleasure to get Danny Southern's name in this show, Diggers. We'll see you next week on the Outer Wing for TABtouch. Real punters play here.
You win some, you lose more. For free and confidential support, call the number on the screen or visit the website.